Greetings, everyone. Moodog from Moodog's Frugal RCs and more. Today we are in the research kitchen doing a upgrade to my AKLOT AKET26 tenor acoustic electric ukulele. Now this one I have not featured on the channel yet. I may do a video expose on this coming up shortly, but this is a solid mahogany topped ukulele. It sounds very nice. There are some quality issues with it, one of them being the tuners that came on this particular unit. There's a lot of people out there doing reviews on these that are not having these problems for some reason. I had a bad run on these. AKLOT and Camise had a bad run, and I ended up getting the ones that were bad. So just a little word to the wise: if you guys are looking at getting something like this from either Camise or AKLOT, make sure that you're looking them over really good before you make any final decisions on whether to keep it or to send it back and get something different. Now you notice I don't have your traditional holder here for a guitar or a ukulele. I'm just using a rifle sighting pillow. It works the same way, so some people may laugh, but that's what we're using today. Now when I wind these strings on these ukuleles, on most of my ukuleles, I wind a couple more turns than a lot of people might wind on here, and there's a reason for that. The main reason is if I ever have to take these strings off the winder pegs here, I can restring it without any issues. Some guys will cut them real short, go around 2 or 3 times, and then they're trying to put the string back on. For whatever reason, they find out they can't. I'm not made of money, so I'm not out buying new strings every time I do something like this. So that's the reason that I have these on here with a couple extra winds. So let's go ahead, and first things first, we're going to go ahead and remove the strings from here, and then we'll get into the actual removing and replacing of the tuning pegs. Those of you that are new to ukuleles might not have seen one of these before. You guitarists out there already know what this thing is, but I wanted to show you this real quick before we start the actual process. This is a product made by Planet Waves. There's a number of different manufacturers making these out there on the market. What this is kind of a Swiss Army knife for your guitar, if you want to think of it that way. You have a peg winder here, which really speeds up the unwinding and winding of your strings if you're replacing strings. Very nice to have this. It has a couple different cutouts here for different size buttons for different size tuning pegs. You have on here a tool that you can remove your bridge buttons and get the strings out. So if you have a typical acoustic guitar that has the press and bridge buttons, there's a tool on the end to remove those. And you also have a string cutting tool. This will cut metal strings or nylon with ease. So very nice, invaluable tool to have. Let's go ahead and get these strings off of here, and I'll show you guys the process. And we can see right here, guys, this is the one that's the offending tuning peg here. We can hear, I'll get closer to the mic. You can hear really gritty sounding. It's very stiff. Instead of just replacing that one, I went ahead and got the whole set. So let's go ahead and get this one loosened up. And mind you, these have been lubricated. I did lubricate these up, and it really didn't make a difference. I had them apart, and I lubricated them all up, and it really didn't make much of a difference. We'll get these strings out of the way here. What we're going to be doing, guys, is removing these 4 tuning pegs off of here, and obviously we're going to be replacing them with the gold tone ones. So let's go ahead and flip the ukulele over to its back side. So the back side is exposed, and we can see here our tuning pegs. We can see on each one of these guys we're going to have 2 screws, and these are just simple small Phillips screws. So we'll go ahead and get these out of the way. Okay, so next thing we want to do is kind of take a look and inspect the wood here, make sure that none of our screw holes look weird, or there's no splits in the actual wood here on the headstock. This one looks pretty good. We can flip it around to the other side, and you'll see that we have these bushings on here yet, and I'm going to go ahead and remove those. So we're going to be using the gold tone ones on here, and generally speaking, you should be able to get a nail or two under here and just kind of pry these up gently and take them up and out of the way. You'll see a little bit of a knurling on here, if you guys can see that or not, but there's a little bit of a knurled edge on there that kind of grips the wood and holds them in place. So we'll go ahead and pull these remaining three out. There's another way to do this, and I should have done it the other way, and that's just by taking a small screwdriver from the back and kind of tapping on the face of these little knurled areas here, and that kind of knocks them up and out of place. But that's okay. So we have it out of there and out of the way now. We can go ahead and start installing our new pegs. But before we do that, let's go ahead and give them a couple of turns here and see what they feel like and take a look at them. You want to make sure that all of these screws... So now that everything's out of the way here, guys, we can go ahead and install our new tuning pegs on here. But before we do that, we want to make sure that these are all turning decently and everything looks good on them. These are pretty smooth feeling for what they are. You want to make sure also that these screws have been snugged down. You don't have to tighten them to the moon. We're not putting together bridges here, but we want to make sure that these posts are tight enough on here and are not going to be flopping around and causing weird tuning or difficulty in tuning your ukulele. So I'll go through all of these here real quick and just kind of spin them a few times, and then go ahead and snug, give this screw just a little bit of a snug there, and that feels pretty good. And we'll go through all of them, do the same thing. Now, normally what I would do is take either some really light grease or some 3-in-1 oil and just kind of oil those. So I think we're going to do that next. So with this, I'm just going to use some standard 3-in-1 oil. You can get this anywhere, any hardware store, very inexpensive, and put like 1 drop on the worm gear where the worm gear and the pinion meet, and just kind of leave it at that. So we'll do all of these. You don't want to use too much of this stuff because it can get a little on the messy side. 1 drop is generally all you're going to need, and that should get the point across of keeping this lubricated. Also, too, guys, you don't want to overdo it with this stuff because you will attract dirt and gunk. These are open, and you can attract dirt and gunk in here and then cause tuning issues going forward. You want to get the most life out of these that you can. So with that being done, the next thing we're going to do is open up our little bag of hardware here and get our bushings out. We'll have 4 bushings and 8 of those little golden screws. Bushings are nothing more than just pressing them into place. So you press them where the holes are here, and you would just press these in flush in all 4 spots here. May end up having to take a small vise. I have a plastic vise. I also have a vice grip that I have plastic jaws on, or even foam jaws you can use on here. Something to pad the surface of the wood and the surface of the metal that you're pressing in, and you could kind of use that pliers as a vise. Now that we have these all in and we're happy that they're all pressed down completely flush, we can go ahead and start installing the pegs themselves from the back. So we'll flip it back over again. When you're doing this type of work, when you're putting these on and you're having to drill holes, you want to make sure that you're being very, very careful, that you're not drilling too big of holes, and you want to make sure that you are going to cover these holes that are exposed back up again. Now, it looks like I'm going to be able to cover one of them here up on the top with the actual plate of the tuner itself. So the first step in doing something like this before you drill is eyeballing these on there as good as you can. You want to make sure that you have a straight plane on the top and the bottom, nothing crooked or skewed. They'll still work if they're a little crooked. This is more for aesthetics than anything else. So you just want to make sure that you're taking your time. Always measure and look twice before you make the cut. That old saying, measure twice, cut once, that applies here. You want to measure, or in this case eyeball, a couple of times before you actually get that drill out and start poking holes in the back of this headstock. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a Sharpie pen. I've got really kind of a fine tip Sharpie that I use for this type of work. You want to make sure you have a small enough tip to make circles where the holes are going to be drilled. And take your time with this. Again, it's going to be futzy. They're just sitting in there, so if you touch this or hit it or something, they're going to swing left or right. You want to get a good look down the actual plane of it and make sure that everything looks pretty straight. And I'm seeing here that this looks pretty good, and I think I'm pretty confident in getting ready to start marking my holes. You want to take a thumb, put it right over and hold the plating in place here. Don't pinch it over one way or the other. You want to make sure it's on there pretty straight, and then go ahead and start marking your holes. One there, and then one right up on top here, and we have one done. So I'm going to go ahead and follow that same suit with the other three, and I'll be right back. And that will just about do it, guys. That'll get everything marked up nice. And I'm going to look at it again before I start poking holes. And I will look and make a determination that that looks perfect. So now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and drill small holes. You don't want to oversize these holes, guys. You want to make them just about the same size as the screws, or even just a touch smaller. You want to make sure that these screws are biting into the wood without being too small and without being too big. You get them too big, you drill the holes too big, and these are not going to grip, and you're going to have these strip out on you real easy. If you drill them too small, you could run the risk of splitting the headstock. These are pretty small, so I wouldn't worry too much about the splitting the headstock factor, but you want to make sure you're doing this the right way. Alright guys, I have located the right size drill bit I'm going to use for this job. You can use a caliper to measure, or you can just kind of eyeball. I just do it the old-fashioned way. I'm an eyeball kind of guy, and I found this drill bit right here a little bit smaller, but once you start twisting it into the wood, I think this is going to be a perfect size. And I would give you an exact size of this, but it really is going to be matter by the manufacturer what size screws they're using. Sometimes they use bigger holes for mounting than other manufacturers do, so just make sure that you're checking and double checking before you start drilling. That's the main thing. Okay, so we're going to start drilling these out. You want to make sure that you got the drill bit in the center of the dot that you made, the center of the hole that you made. Put down a little bit of pressure. Now it's going to be critical to put these holes in there straight. Start out slow. Once you get that bit going, speed it up. And I think I went all the way through the head. I think I did. And if you do that, yep, and I did. Look at that. So I'm going to have to get some filler. I was just going to mention, don't go too far in this thing because you're going to drill right through, and it looks like I have. So I'm actually going to have to go ahead and put some filler on that. But that's what you don't want to do. Don't do that. Don't be stupid like I just was. Don't make that mistake. It's not worth it, especially if you're dealing with a really expensive instrument. I would recommend, if you're dealing with a really expensive instrument, that you don't do this yourself. Nice and slow. So the key is not to go too deep on these, guys. You don't want to drill through the headstock. That is going to be a big no-no. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe the dust off the backside here. Get our... Now I've got a little bit of lemon oil on this rag, so that's actually going to be beneficial to this headstock. It's not going to hurt it at all. So when we got that to that point, guys, we can go ahead and reinstall our tuners. Leaving it a little bit loose to start, so till we get these other screws in place, then we can line things up a little better and tighten things down. And I think we'll be good to go that way. You don't want to tighten everything down one at a time and then you're going to have to undo things and start over again. So we want to make sure that we're doing this the right way. All right, guys, we have finished the project. I think it was a success. Take your time doing this if you're going to be drilling it. If you're not comfortable drilling these things, then you make sure that you have somebody do it that knows what they're doing or is comfortable doing it. As it sits right now, I have a couple of holes I have to fill. I have 4 holes on the back side here that need to be filled. And what I'm going to do probably is just get a kind of a wax type pen. You can buy them at the hardware store, at the lumber yard, or your paint stores, in a mahogany, dark mahogany color, and just kind of fill those with that pen and call it a day. There is no big, no big deal with something like this. This is an inexpensive instrument. I'm not really too crazy concerned about that. And it is what it is. So if you take your time, do it right, you can actually move these around. The holes are big enough that you can actually, get them in place, drill your holes, get them in place, and you can move them back or forward before you snug them down. When you snug them down, I purposely use a small screwdriver, so I can't put that much torque on them. I can't over tighten them this way, or I have a less chance of over tightening. Over tightening these things, guys, is going to cause problems. You're going to strip them out, and then you're going to be on the outside looking in pretty much. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out a lot, guys. Stay tuned for more cool stuff on the channel. See you all on the next one, and God bless the Republic.